Someone's looking to get into a fight with a gorilla. Here's a look at the new Diamond Select Legends in 3 Dimensions Godzilla 1962 half-scale resin bust. When Godzilla is awoken by an American nuclear submarine, it is freed from its iceberg prison and immediately makes its way towards Japan. At the same time, King Kong is captured in his home in Faroe Island and transported to Japan to become a TV star. When the two meet, who will win and can the country survive? This approximately 10-inch tall, half-size scale bust of Godzilla is based on his appearance in the 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla. It features a high level of detailing and exacting paint applications and is only limited to an edition of 1,000 pieces. I may not be able to speak for where the monkeys move to, but at least in this review we'll be looking at half the big battle and half of the King of the Monsters, courtesy of the folks over at Diamond Select that did provide the sample of the 1962 Legends in 3 Dimensions Godzilla bust. That we could have a look at this review. Grabbing, though, the tape measure, it almost zipped back at me. We're looking at, though, at the bust of Godzilla being about 9.5 inches in height. It is. You can see it right there. Or the bust is going to work out to be about 24 centimeters tall. Tagging along with Godzilla is a tiny little iceberg in which the bust is rested on top of. But to tag also along with the bust, you get yourself a certificate of authenticity. The certificate you'll see in a second does have the same matching number that's printed on the bottom of the base. In this case, to indicate as well that this is Godzilla from the 1962 film, in that it's also at 1/2 scale resin bust. And of the very limited run of only 1,000 pieces, the one that was provided to me, overlooking the zero, is 221. Always good to hold on to these. I'd like to personally have these displayed on my shelf along with my resin bust. I would certainly heed this bit of caution. Just be careful that you don't have this exposed to sunlight. Lights, especially sunlight shining directly on it, may not only fade the certificate of authenticity, but may also fade the number on the front of it, something you certainly don't want. Getting now a closer look at Godzilla himself, which again, you're only getting from like the shoulders up. So all down below here is basically just an iceberg. And I say just an iceberg, sort of diminishing it just a bit. But it is a really cool looking iceberg that they have sculpted. You can kind of see that if you were to travel in here, how cold it would awfully be. But you can also see as well, and hopefully you can see, that they've used this with it. Well, they've made this from a translucent blue, and it does look really good on it. Being that it's also a resin, be careful though of it. They've nicely frosted the ends of this, so it does look like it's got a really cold exterior to it to spin this around so you can see it from all the sides. It is certainly a nice way to present this. Something I think that Diamond does consistently well when it comes to Legends of 3 Dimensions is not only sculpting the bust really well, but choosing a very suitable base in which the bust is attached onto. I did mention earlier, if we were to flip the base up, underneath here, you'll see a matching number. I certainly hope you'd have a matching number unless they swapped around the certificates by mistake. But underneath, you can see that it says 221 out of the 1,000 releases. Here, though, you're also treated to rubberized feet, at least on the corners of the iceberg to prevent scratching on surfaces, but also as well, I always say this, that it provides just a little bit of gap space, that if you are safe, for example, to put this on the shelf and you slide this around, I hope that you're not going to do this, but it won't then rub the ink away, rub the number away, and then of course you'll always want to keep that number intact and on display if ever down the road you decide you want to part ways with the statue. I can't see why you'd really want to though. Getting though a closer look at Godzilla. One of my favorite looks for Godzilla is the one that we got from him around the 60s era of Godzilla films. It's a classic look for Godzilla if you ask me, and I think they've handled the sculpt of him, at least what we get of him, being, of course, we don't get the shoulders and we don't get anything that goes below the shoulders. I think what we get, at least of Godzilla, is a really well sculpted and equally well painted bust. You can see with this that he has the larger eyes. Some, I think, have coined this guy the more cat-looking Godzilla. And, again, I feel just short of whiskers and tiny little ears, maybe, yeah, he would resemble a little bit more of a cat. But he does have, again, very more the characteristic traits that I always liked about the King of the Monsters around this time frame of the movies. I would always watch the Toho films Sunday afternoons without fail. And I always very, very vividly remember the one from 1962, the one, of course, he does battle King Kong himself. He does have, again, the sculpting mostly painted here in a dark, very dark gray. But you can see the way that they've actually sculpted the eyes. It looks to be like they're lenses themselves that may have used, probably in this case, I'm guessing clear resin, and then maybe printed the image of the eye behind it. So it does give more of a realism to the eyes when you're looking at them. The mouth itself, as you can see, is opened, a row of teeth smaller on the top, longer on the bottom, and they've been painted nicely here in white with some additional little bit of airbrushing, it seems, of brown. And you can see like the inside of its tongue has also been given a little bit of paint. In this case, it looks to be more like a very dark purpley red. The work alone, just of sculpting the inside of the mouth and painting it as well as they do. I also like that they added what seems to be more like a clear coat finish partially on the teeth, but more on the tongue. So it gives it more of a wet look to it. Of course, as we move a little bit further back here, you can see really all the sculpted work that they put into the scales themselves. Unfortunately, with only being a bust, you get really the missed opportunity of not seeing all the rest of the foliage of spikes that he has running down the spine. But you get one of them. You get one large one here. And you got some neighboring spikes of a smaller size all the way around it as well. And I think those have been sculpted and painted very nicely too. It's a very dark colored Godzilla, so I think it really does help as well that they chose, in this case, to use an iceberg as the display base option, because it certainly does bring a lot of necessary color to that. If not for that, it would be a very dark colored Godzilla, as it certainly would have been the case also in the films as well. I like the dark color of gray that they chose here. And it's not just either gray. It's also looking as if they probably have added a slightly lighter color in some of the areas. And like the case with the tongue and the teeth, it looks like they've also added a little bit of a clear finish to it. So it does have a little bit of a sheen to it. Maybe not to the extent of the tongue and the teeth, but I think overall it's a nice, really nice looking statue. Sometimes there is an issue when it comes to these legends in 3 dimensions. I don't personally feel sometimes that some of the bases that they choose really give a good stability to the statue. I think there's enough of the iceberg connecting to the bottom of this, or at least as a base bottom here, where I feel like enough of it is touching to Godzilla where I don't feel like there's any stabilizing issues. One such Legends in 3 Dimensions figure we actually had looked at just recently here on the channel was the Luke Skywalker. They chose in that case to actually have him perched on top of the nose end of an X-Wing. And I think for that might have been a figure where or a bust, I probably would have made a little bit wider of a base. But I think in the case of Godzilla, not only did they choose a proper base, they brought in some much needed appreciated color, but it also makes for a very stable looking statue when you put this on your shelf for yourself. Covering perhaps just as much terrain as the King of the Monsters and all the Toho films combined, the folks over at Diamond have been churning out some spectacular looking statues over the years. And of course, the company's been smart enough to as well release the statues, knowing that collectors all have varying degrees of budget to work with. If you are a long-time collector and you have more available funds to put into collecting statues, then of course the company's been putting out some amazing looking resin premium statues, some of which we've already looked at here on the channel with more to follow. If you are first-time collecting, I always recommend go the route of collecting the DST Gallery PVC statues. Being that they're also made of plastic, you're still getting amazing looking sculpted statues at a much more wallet-friendly budget. Then, of course, in the middle, there's always the Legends in the 3 Dimensions. And I think the thing that's the charming aspect of the companies producing statues like this is, first of all, it takes up a lot less space than perhaps the Premier Collection resin statues, but you're also still getting the pluses of having these being released in resin. You're getting a smaller scale statue, sure, but you're getting just as much work to sculpt and paint these pieces that they would with a larger scale statue. You're also getting the benefit of also getting just below the shoulders, in this case for Godzilla, a fitting statue base that always goes well with the characters that they chose. So I don't think there's really been a time where I've looked at the statue's base and thought, I don't know, I would have gone something different. Maybe there was the case with the Luke Skywalker, just because, again, like the sizing of the X-Wing, I thought perhaps was way too small and maybe didn't balance the statue as well as it should. But I think for a Godzilla to have an iceberg as a statue base is fitting, and it does bring in some necessary color. Because again, like this version of Godzilla, generally any version of Godzilla tends to be all dark gray with dark colors overall. To bring in some necessary blue done in a translucent blue resin does finish the statue off rather nicely. And I might just be a bit biased for also saying this as well, because to close my eyes, I did say in this review, do it in a safe place where you don't have to worry about walking. But if you were to close your eyes right now and think, what is the definitive look to Godzilla? Personally, for me, I would say the stuff that we were getting from Toho in the 60s. If you were to close your eyes, hopefully in a safe place where you can do that, what would you say is the definitive look for the King of the Monsters? drop those comments down below and let me know what you think. Also, as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at DST, that's Diamond Select Toys, who did take the time and provide this sample of the Legends in 3 Dimensions Godzilla from 1962 from King Kong versus Godzilla. If you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Yes, make sure you turn on the bell notification. Sure. And if you have a little bit of time on your giant lizard hands and you want to stick around on this channel for a little bit longer than what this review will be, popping up at the very end of this video will also be a playlist of other things that I've looked at for DST, Diamond Select Toys, with many more to follow. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.